time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand with your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
Welcome back. Hopefully this is not your first time checking in with the Brandy podcast, but hopefully this is a couple episodes in. You've enjoyed this and you're circling back around. Today, Reilly and I are going to talk about color, and particularly when it comes to branding, how color speaks. And what we mean by that is that color conveys a certain message, and people may not understand that, but psychologically, our brain responds, and our body, our physicality, even our heart rate, respond differently to certain colors. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of an important subject matter, because I think a lot of times, people will approach color with more of their personal preference when it comes to their brand. If a small business owner is developing their brand, many times will take in their favorite color. Or I've literally had conversations with clients where we would present some colors, and people would respond going, okay, that's great, but you know what, my wife really loves pink, and we need to somehow include pink in the color palette. And that may be okay if that is going to appeal to the right demographic, and it's going to convey the right message about the brand or whatever the brand is trying to communicate. Yep. Yeah. And so it does matter. And a lot of people don't think that it does, but time and time again, it does. Classic example is with regards to restaurants. If you go to any restaurant that is a sit down with a higher price point, fine dining restaurant, we'll just call it fine dining restaurant, they will utilize a rich color palette that has rich dark tones, muted colors, very subdued, and it creates a peaceful mindset, lowers the heart rate, and you feel relaxed when you enter these places. And the reason is because they want you to stay. They want you to stay for a good hour and a half and enjoy the meal. Maybe order an extra course, stay for dinner and coffee, order another bottle of wine. Their intent is not quick turn. Whereas on the flip side, you look at fast food restaurants. They have very bright color palettes. Sometimes they even incorporate, black and white checkered flooring, and you look at their color on their palettes or their logos. Yeah. They want you in and out of their business. Yeah. Exactly why In-N-Out's colors are red, white, and yellow, because of those high stimulus increases the heart rate, and you literally go in, and you're not going to spend hours in a fast food restaurant. You're going to go in, sit down, eat, and go.
Yeah, and it's quick turn, because lower price point, quick turn, get more tables filled, and just keep them moving. And that's what we've written about it before, of just kind of the overall psychological influence of color. And like you said, I feel like a lot of businesses will discount the true power of color. And when you think about it, it's like a lot of our intake as humans is through our eyes. And so this visual stimulus that color actually gives us plays a huge role in our perception of a brand, or just of anything in that matter. Yeah. And so really when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, even with fast food restaurants, like the red and yellow has been proven in studies to actually make someone hungry, because it does create that stimulation within us. It creates actually the caloric burn. Like we go, okay, we need to fuel the fire, so we need to eat. And it makes people hungry, and that's why you do see it with Carl's Jr., In-N-Out, I think even Sonic, like all these brands.
And Blue, on the other side, actually physically studies have shown that blue curbs appetite. So again, the powerful use. And what I love about it is, like, to me, color is for designers, for brand designers, color is like that top secret tool in our tool chest of utilizing color theory, and how audiences respond to color, and what kind of things it conveys as a kind of a silent edge when we're developing brands, because it really lends itself to powerful messaging and a powerful brand aspect that most of the audience, most of the general consumers aren't even aware, because there's so much physicality and psychological response to color.
Yeah, and that's where it's like, when you do think of color, I think a lot of people just think, oh, I like this color, I don't like this color. When actually it's like you have chemicals in your body being released from serotonin to dopamine that are actually making you react a certain way. And like you said with blue makes you feel that way because there's serotonin being released and you're actually calming the state. Like you're actually going into a rest and digest actually area or zone where your body's going, okay, you ate, now it's time to chill out and relax and eat your food, which is completely natural. But reds, yellows, oranges are much more energetic, and they actually create more of a dopamine rush where you're actually going, okay, this is energy, this is high level state, and I need to have intake. And so it's like when you do look at all the colors across the spectrum, it's like they all have a different effect on who we are, on not only like a psychological level, but actually a chemical level of who we are as humans.
Yeah, there's a lot of science behind color. And when you know about it, when you're educated in that and knowledgeable in it, it can be a very, very powerful tool in brand, and it's a brand's touch point. Classic example would be like, for instance, coffee shops, whether it's Pete's or Starbucks. A lot of coffee shops lean into very natural, more mature color tones, dark browns, right? Things like that. And then obviously Starbucks is iconic with its green, but the green is green as a color conveys positivity and growth, healing, and it obviously equates to being environmentally conscious. And so, the combination of that with your earth tones, there's a reason coffee shops are an environment where you want to come meet someone, a friend that you've been wanting to connect with, and you order a cup of coffee or two, and or go and study or go and read a book over a cup of coffee because they want you to come in and not be in a rush. Because it's the business's benefit that you're there for quite some time. Because guess what? Your coffee's done. You might order another cup, or you might order a pastry because now you're hungry, or whatever it is. And so that's one thing that just one example. Another great example is the color blue. Blue is notorious for representing loyalty, dependability, trust, reliability. It's secure, it's calming, it's peaceful, it's mature. And so for that reason alone, a lot of brands in the financial sector and the investing sectors utilize blue. Chase Bank being one of them, but there's many of them. Even like IBM. Yeah. Some of these brands that they want to be conveyed as trusting, dependable. Blue does that. Partly because blue also is a color that comes across and almost creates a more of a melancholy effect. It's not aggravating. It's not agitating. Yeah. But it's cool. It's calm. It's psychologically.
True blue.
Yeah, it psychologically conveys that of just being more relaxed, and so particularly the financial sector or other sectors where they want that credibility and trust conveyed. Blue is a powerful color for that. But every color too has a positive and a negative to it, and we'll get more into that as we talk about certain different colors. But there's always that. For instance, I mentioned green as being positive and growth and healing. At the same time, green is the one color that is associated with jealousy and envy. Green with envy. That's a very common term, maybe not so much used nowadays, but for decades, that the term, he was green with envy. And so, jealousy, guilt, things like that those feelings are associated with green as well. So if someone wanted to convey, jealousy or envy to an audience, green is a powerful use of color to that. And not to say that I don't want us to limit the application of the color to just the brand itself, because many brands are out there, but they might use a strong color in one of their marketing materials because they're trying to, again, reinforce the message verbally that they're communicating to the audience, and psychologically and emotionally they convey that through a particular color as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think going back to the financials, like you think of finances, you need something that's trustworthy. You need something that's calming, because usually for most Americans, finances are a stressful situation. So Chase, these other brands out there that are implementing with blue to calm and to kind of lower that overall stress level. So that's what you're trying to do, and that's what really blue is great for, is that calming nature. And that's why, dental offices to medical offices, like you have this blue that's really starting to calm. It's a little more masculine as a color, just because it's colder, it's not as warm, but overall, you do get a lot of great I guess results from it.
Yeah.
And
it's funny. You mentioned masculine, and it's something too that color, even particularly in the previous decades, for a long time. There's always a reason why even birth or gender announcements. When people have, they didn't do that when I was having kids, but now it's all the rage, right? You're a gender reveal party, right, when you're pregnant, and it's, for the most part, blue or pink for boy or girl. And, we live in a day and age now where the typical gender of male or female is, or the association of masculinity or femininity is being blurred from being tied into blue or pink. But there's still ingrained culture, ingrained thinking that make those associations. So there's a reason, that if you're trying to, appeal more to a masculine, you'd stay with the cooler, more, all the ranges of blues in between. And then particularly with feminine colors, you go much more mauve, rose, pink, reds, all the spectrums there, because it just naturally feels more feminine.
Yep.
And again, we're leaning on more older stereotypes, but there's stereotypes that we have been conditioned with, and will probably take a long time to erase in our culture. So they exist whether you like it or not.
Yep.
And then utilizing those as a tool in your brand. It's funny too. I just had this conversation with my wife when she was. Someone was asking her, they were going to go out for talking about her birthday, and they go, "What's your favorite color?" Well, my wife's favorite color is black. Everything's black. Black is her favorite color for fashion. Black or gray. And black is actually, when it comes down to color theory, black is the fullness of all colors put together create black. If you combine all pigments of paint, you are going to get black.
Right.
Now, it's different with light. Light is actually the opposite. There's no color. So there's two different, psychological approaches to color. You have what painted pigment, but then you have when sunlight bounces off something. So anything that looks like it's black is actually, it's bouncing all of the light off of it, so it appears black. Whereas white, it absorbs all the color spectrum of white light. But it's funny because black is a color. It's all of the colors. So if anything, whenever she gets teased, like, "What, black can't be your favorite color?" I say, "Well, then just tell them it's all the colors put together, and
the rainbow
it is black,
just mashed together."
Black is a great color for a number of reasons. It conveys power, conveys authority, and it's a timeless color that never will go out of style. Color, no matter what you choose, is always dictated by the decade or the year of what is the new color trends. And particularly, people look at fashion, they look at interior design, paint colors. Whenever someone's going to paint a house or paint the exterior or the interior, they go down to the paint store. There's color trends that dictate what is the new color, what are colors that are in style, right? And so a lot of times when locking in on a color with your brand, a lot of times you might be dictating into what's a very trendy color, but then 5, 8, 10 years from now, it might be out of touch.
Yep.
So there's always dangers in locking into something that's trendy. So like very finite trend, like, oh, this particular color of
coral.
Right. Or hypothetical right now, what is popular, even though it's not like proclaimed by a lot of the color, like Pantone and some of these others, but like Barbie pink, right? I mean, the Barbie movie last year, everything blew up. And so pink is just super popular right now.
Yeah.
But there's degrees of pink. Yeah. And if you look at pink over what pink, the saturation. So when you talk about color and you talk about very saturated, it's very pure. You're talking about the pureness of it. So a low saturated pink is almost introducing kind of a gray into the color, and it's not as pure, it's not as bright, it's more subdued. If you look at pink from the 70s and 60s versus the pink of the 80s. The 80s embraced bright neon color palettes. So everything was pure, bright. That's why neon was just like, it was in the 80s. Then you get into the 90s, you get into the 2000s, 2010s, even 2020s that we're in right now. Pink as a color has changed of what is, what is trendy. And I always caution some brands too, when they're locking in on a brand color, is that if they're doing it in like what's timely. In other words, if you were to utilize pink in a brochure or on your website, but not with the intention of this pink is going to stay with us for the next 5 to 10 years, right? It's like the signature brand pink. Yeah. Then be mindful that the and this is just an example, the pink you use today may not be the pink of tomorrow. So now is your brand going to feel outdated? Yep. And that's why a lot of times you even see brands that do a reface. They may have an iconic color, right? Let's say purple. Say if a brand's iconic color is purple, but after 3 or 4 years, they might reface and tweak their purple just a little bit. Not enough to maybe like, they don't proclaim it from the mountaintops, but just enough that the audience would pick it up, and they're staying true to the current trends of purple and where it's going, so that they stay current. But if they stay locked into the same purple for the last 20 years, now it might be a good thing, but it might also be a bad thing in that it might make their brand feel dated and out of touch.
I think actually Meta did that recently, because I guess the original Facebook blue was determined because I guess Mark Zuckerberg's a little colorblind. So that blue has a slight purple hue to it. So that blue has stayed with the Facebook brand throughout all these years. And then when they made the transition to Meta, they actually, I think, made it a little more vibrant, or a little more blue, a little more like, give it a little more oomph. And that was to not only kind of detach it from this Facebook we've known for so long, right? But to show it that it's okay, it's evolving, it's getting to this new, this is a new chapter, this is Meta, this is, whatever. But I think that's, like you said, there's some smarts to that of updating the color, because it can change. But even like ironically, like the pink being used now, like the Barbie pink, that's the Barbie pink from, so long ago, and it's come back around where it's like this, it's this obnoxious Barbie pink, and it's known for that, where it's like, just like the IBM, like IBM has its IBM blue, where that color. Yeah.
And it's funny, as we kind of bounce around and talk about each color, there's one brand that comes to mind, and it's a brand we never ever talk about in any of the previous episodes, that utilizes white so strongly, and that would be a brand of fruit that we like to call Apple. And there's a reason, right, Reilly? There's a reason that their packaging is gloriously minimalistic and white.
Yeah, and I think it just goes into the minimalistic vibe that they have had through and through on all their devices, their packaging, their storefronts, and it, to me, is like it's just ethos that goes through the entire Apple brand of minimal, user friendly. It's there's no bells and whistles, there's no tricks, and they've used it to actually as something as common as the color white, one of the most basic, most common colors. They've used it to make it iconic. Yeah. When they first came out with their headphones, right, and they had the whole ad campaign where it was just the color displays with the people dancing or whatever, and they had the white headphones, and it's just been and now I'm looking at our cords on our computers, and they're all white.
Everything like Apple is white.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
It's so simple that they've seriously cornered the color white. Like it's incredible. But also it speaks so much to their brand, because white does have that. It's so clean and crisp, and just it's neat and tidy, and but then the way they do it, it's like it doesn't feel clinical in a sense, but it feels organized, and it feels precise.
White is great for creating a brand's association with purity, innocence, honesty, because white is conveyed as being neutral in color. Lack of color is white. A certain level of neutrality.
Yeah, it's like unbiased.
Unbiased, exactly. It also, white is great for high contrast. So when using it against any other color, it jumps out.
Even when we present to clients, if we're like, hey, this is your color palette, and it's black and white, they'll sometimes be like, wait, where's our color? We need a color. And I'm like, no, it's not. It, like, again, white and black working together, and like Scott said, the contrast that you can gain from that, actually there's a lot of richness in that.
Yeah.
And there's actually is an association with higher contrast is higher value and higher almost like luxury. There's a richness to it, and there's so much more depth to the brand when you do introduce higher contrast. And I think there's something to be said there about just going back to the basics and focusing on this understated beauty of black and white, and even some darker grays and stuff that you can introduce. But there's something there that's, you know, it's almost counterintuitive to what people think, because when you think of black and white, you think of, oh, a black and white printer or something like that seems almost like quote unquote basic, and it's not what it should be like once Technicolor entered the scene. But it's like a black and white film. There's something beautiful about a black and white film that, you know, everything, the shots, everything had to take a different approach where there's a lot more beauty and art to it. And I think that's something that we've encapsulated and been able to hold on to as you know, a society.
And both black and white are timeless.
Yeah.
You will every decade you can if you want to create a brand and never have to ever address any type of rebrand and want to develop a brand color palette, stick with black and white, because it's never going to, it's always going to be in style. Black it will always be that. They both convey, you know, purity contrasted with power and authority, and maturity. That comes from those things, you know, and you get into some other colors that are more vibrant. You know, when we talk about like more positive type of color tones, we look at like yellow and orange. A lot of colors that have warmth to them. Those things convince positivity, cheerfulness, joy, happiness, optimism. But at the same time, yellow and orange also convey caution, and those colors can physically cause anxiety. There's a reason why yield signs, traffic signs, things that are causing you to
take
not
note.
Hazards, but again, look at road signage. If nothing more, look at road signage. There's a reason that we use red, yellow, and green or orange in general, universal. Again, not just the United States, but there's a reason that there's almost a global association with certain colors for conveying certain things. Orange is one that causes a pause, potential hazard. It's like arresting, and it says, hey, look at me. There's a reason you need to address it. And same thing with yellow. Yellow is pause for something else, right? Either slow down or
it's almost
hey,
emphasis.
There's something coming up.
You think of a highlighter. Exactly.
Now, if your brand wants to create that emotional reaction with your audience, then those warm color palettes of yellow, orange, red, they will do the job. So again, the idea is whenever you're approaching your touch points, look at the context of what you're trying to say, and color will do just that. Without even realizing it. The specific color you choose to use, and not only that particular color, but like I talked about, the saturation, the purity of that color conveys certain things too in branding.
And it can be interwoven and really pulled through the entire brand, through all the touch points, through your website, through really all the things that your brand's going to interact with your audience, and it just helps kind of bring home the point of your brand's experience.
And we talked about black and white, so let's talk about the color that's in between that. Let's talk about gray. You know, gray is utilized by a lot of brands to convey, a graceful, sleek, technological. There's a reason that gray has been associated. There's a reason most laptops, right? Or particularly with Apple. Apple doesn't produce white laptops. Doesn't produce black laptops. Right, but for the most part, you look at they have space gray. They have different levels of gray.
Yeah.
Because gray communicates technology. It communicates a progressive approach.
Yeah, I love a
right?
good gray.
But at the same time, gray can convey insincerity, coldness, indifferent, kind of neutral. It is a neutral, for lack of a better term, it's a neutral color. Most grays you see in branding, in printed materials, things like that are literally not 50% black. Yeah. They have either warm grays, cool grays, and those convey, again, that kind of emotion. You can have a gray that is more a warmer cast. In other words, you can there is a warmth to the gray versus a colder gray that has more blues or things like that, whereas grays that have more warmth in them in the color spectrum.
Yeah, in the automobiles in the last like 3-4 years, there's been that clay gray that's just become super popular.
Yeah.
And there's been so many variations of it, of more bluish tones, more like warmer, greenish, and some of them nail it. Some of the automakers, but then some of them
the grayish greens and things
like
that. But and ultimately, that's why, again, like we talked about saturation. Ultimately, like for instance, a very a greenish gray. I'm trying to think if it's. I'm trying to think of what the car brand is, because I just saw one the other day where you're seeing that. But again, that is like low saturated green or low saturated blue or low saturated red. To the point that it's more gray than the color. But that's where we get into the color cast of a gray and what that conveys. And so a lot of times it's like picking any color and then having a dial that you can turn up all the way to its purest form where there's zero gray presence. And then you can turn it all the way down so it's almost 100% gray, but just a little bit of warmth, either in yellow or orange or reds, or coolers where it's green, purples, blues. And so that can lend itself too. The other thing too about color theory that we haven't talked about is we've been talking in the context of singular color use. But the reality is that when you get into, if you've been, get into color theory, there are what we consider contrasting colors. And these are primarily sets of colors that, when together, create a heightened sense of to the brain. It heightens the activity of the brain. It's very visually stimulating. And so those color sets are green and red, blue and yellow, and purple and orange. They are opposite on what we call the color wheel. And the reality is that when used together, if I was to utilize yellow text on top of a dark blue background, that is going to have a more heightened visual and therefore cerebral stimulating response to the viewer than if I was to use a green against a light green against a dark blue background.
Yeah.
The more that color goes to yellow against that blue, literally it's like a dial. I can dial that in and know that I am going to be heightening the visual response of the viewer. And
to Scott's point, there's actually been, I think it was MailChimp, they did a huge case study on it about, they have their brand color, and then there was one button, their call to action on their website, and they actually, that was their brand color. Like, oh, that makes sense. We'll make the button our brand color. And the click rate was all right. And then they swapped it to the actual like juxtaposition of the color, and it increased the click-through rate like 10x, like right off the bat. And that's why even like on Apple, I think their button for the buy now, if I remember, it's blue. Even the whole site, I think, is black and white, grays, all of that, and then the product colors. But for the actual buy or add to cart button, it's a blue that they actually do, which is crazy because you don't think of Apple having a color, but they actually do implement like a blue. Yeah. And it's like very electric blue.
Even things like, for certain things like physical responses that a lot of people, they take for granted, but things like green and red. And we're talking
Christmas.
about, if we're talking about you, oh my gosh, let's not talk about Christmas. It's our favorite holiday. In fact, for those of you who don't know Reilly and I personally, you know that we could literally live in Christmas year round. We could play Christmas music in the office and
We'll probably start
in
soon.
July, and it would not phase us. It would phase the neighboring offices around us, but we live in Christmas land.
And I actually have a good example before we go of green versus red, and that was at the post office. Is that I was mailing something, and it asked me if it was like I was like shipping like an explosive or something, where it was like
Which
no,
you do all the time.
yeah,
I
which
know.
I do most days, but it was like, is this explosive or substance or something like that, where no is the good answer, right? So you want to click no because yes is going to be issues, and I look at the options on the screen, and no was in red, and yes was in green. And I had to stop, and I talked to the cashier about it because I was like, "Wait, I want to do no, right? Like I'm not shipping.
Don't
anything.
want no.
Yeah, no, I want no.
Yeah.
But then it's red, so that makes me not want to push it.
Right.
And I'm like, I want to do no because I'm not doing anything suspicious. I'm just trying to mail this. I think it was it was a copy
Like if
of
that's
Brandy.
the thing, if the post office is trying to convey that we do not want you shipping anything explosive, then they would like the no to be in
no.
green and the yes is in red, because psychologically you're looking at it and your brain is already gravitating towards
the green.
the green, which conveys go, proceed, yes,
Good.
right, good, yeah, exactly.
And it was and I had to stop, and I was like, I feel so wrong pressing the red button. Like it was, even though no was the right answer.
But even for when in user interaction in
UI.
apps and web, utilizing red and green, again, they're common things. But when people decide to, you can choose with color to either stay with the conventional norms or break away from them. It's up to you, and it's up to the brand and what they're trying to do. There's intentionality with every single color you use.
Yeah.
It conveys a certain emotional response. It has conventional and cultural associations to it, and it helps strengthen or weaken the message of your brand and the positioning of your brand in its marketplace.
There's so many layers to this, psychologically, chemically within our bodies, but there's also so much. There's a foundation to it, to who we are as humans and as a society, and we must take those things into consideration when forming our brands.
So bottom line, if you are a small business, a small brand, and you're trying to develop a great brand, which is what, the whole purpose of what this podcast is all about, is just helping brands achieve greatness. Be mindful of these things, and if you aren't mindful, then rely on the knowledge and the counsel of the brand developers that hopefully you are hiring to develop your brand, and hopefully they know the science behind color theory and how to utilize it as a very, very powerful tool in your brand and your message.
Until next time, cheers.
Cheers.